Ekurhuleni, where the ANC lost 10% support, securing only 38% of the votes, while the EFF support grew by 2%, Freedom Front Plus grew by 3%, and newcomers, ActionSA, grew by 7%. Let's take this discussion further. And the ANC's discussing the ANC's possible coalition partners. When I joined in the studio by senior reporter Mahlako Komane. Mahlako, very good afternoon to you. Thanks for being here with us. All right, so it looks very interesting what's going on in Ekurhuleni. We're looking at the ANC, the DA, EFF, ActionSA, FF Plus, the main players, the top five, if we can put it that way. What's likely to happen here? What's likely to play out? We have a situation where the ANC can talk to anyone, really. Can talk to the DA, can perhaps talk to the EFF. But on the side of that, we could also have a conversation with all the other four, where the DA, EFF, ActionSA, FF Plus decide to just team up and kick out the ANC altogether. What are we seeing happening? Yes,
you are quite correct. I think right now in Ekurhuleni, as well as I suppose in other metros, because we have about 70 hung councils at the moment, or municipalities that are hung. In Ekurhuleni specifically, you're quite correct when you say that the ANC can talk to anybody, but the opposition parties themselves can also decide that they can talk amongst themselves and kick ANC to the curb, where we would have what we call an opposition coalition, where all the opposition parties join together and they decide how to slice this pie that is a metro. You remember that Ekurhuleni, in terms of resources, quite a large chunk goes there. They've got a big budget. And also, I think quite importantly, in terms of how these coalition goes, I think a lot of parties are very cautious not to have a Tswane situation where the coalition is not stable. Ekurhuleni previously has been very successful, but as you've said, that they have then since lost 10% in terms of the votes. So they have a lot of begging to do, if you want to call it that, a lot of wheeling and dealing that they need to do with the various parties. Should they approach the DA, it's done and it's concluded. But does the DA want to go into bed with the ANC? There's also the new kid on the block, which is ActionSA, also, I suppose, holds some sort of sway. I'm not sure how important is Ekurhuleni to the ActionSA movement, but we do know in Johannesburg quite big. He is obviously probably wanting to take mayorship there, but will he get it? It's another thing. But in Ekurhuleni, perhaps he's open to forming a coalition. But he had said, Herman Mashaba had been quite specific to say that he's not willing to talk to the ANC. But, when we spoke to a political analyst today, he said that perhaps Mr. Mashaba spoke too soon. At one point, he is going to need to sit down at the table with certain parties, because he obviously did not get enough to have what we want to call a lion's share in terms of coalitions.
Well, the ANC does seem to be in this precarious position, but they also, when we were having some of the press briefings by the ANC at the IEC at the Rock, they also seemed quite confident, and I don't know if it's the remnants of arrogance or what that was, but they did display some sort of a bravado as they were talking, and I wonder if it's linked to the fact that the DA has, through their leader John Steenhuisen, said, look, we're prepared to work with the ANC for so long as Cyril Ramaphosa is at the helm, and I wonder if that's perhaps playing into it, or is that a conversation that we've forgotten about now? But I certainly do remember at some point the DA saying, we can certainly work with Cyril Ramaphosa.
Well, you would remember that the Cyril Ramaphosa has been purported as moving, leaning more to a certain part of the electorate. And I don't know if that's necessarily such a good idea for the ANC to be seen to be in bed with the DA. That could also speak differently when we go to the next elections in 2024. So for the ANC, it's going to be very careful who it decides to align with. But there's also the issue of ideology, what these parties stand for. The DA has always been very vocal about corruption, saying if you look at a lot of their campaigning was centered around what is wrong within the ANC and how they can do that better. It would be very interesting to also come and see how they would then sell a coalition with the very same ANC that they used as a campaigning tool.
And it's interesting that you put that into the conversation. You talk about the difference in ideologies, and in the likelihood that the DA, EFF, ActionSA and FF Plus decide to sit together and have a conversation, I'm looking at the fact that ActionSA and EFF have very different immigration ideologies. Their stance on foreign nationals is very, very different, and one wonders, particularly given the fact that it seems that ActionSA was able to garner so many votes due to what they say regarding foreign nationals. Will there be a possibility for for ActionSA and EFF to be able to agree on anything? So I wonder if that is even a possibility. ActionSA would be better off with the ANC, wouldn't they?
They would certainly perhaps be better off with the ANC, but then at the end of the day, in politics, there's no permanent friends, no permanent enemies.
Yeah.
So it also comes down to that. But I suppose, where can they meet each other? Do they have enough positives where they can meet each other and to be able to push whatever agenda that they may have, be it service delivery, be it employment and so forth? Do they, in terms of that, are they able to meet each other as a party with those ideologies? On the immigration issues, I mean, if you look at the places where ActionSA has managed to get a lot of support, it's in places where I suppose the ideology and as well as the campaigning of ActionSA has spoken to people there, and what they feel are their problems in terms of the issues of immigration. And if you look at the population dynamics there, that would tell you where they've managed to garner the vote. But it will be very interesting, I think, to also see that how would ActionSA then go back to their voting, to their voters, and to be able to defend a coalition with the EFF. But for them, they've not ruled out, as far as I know, a coalition with the EFF. Sometimes, enemies in the same pod do better than friends. That, with the DA, we know that historically they have issues there. Yeah. But if it's about power and centralizing power away from the ANC into a singular opposition coalition, perhaps it's in the best interest for everybody to see what they can do there.
All right, Mahlako, it's been a pleasure. I wish we had more time. I think we could go on for an hour on this issue. Thank you so very much for giving us your input and on certainly your reporting on this issue and what's going on in Ekurhuleni.